Hello Geneva, and welcome to Geneva Works. I'm your host Kevin Starr. Winter is here, and that brings a unique set of safety challenges to our area. Here to provide us some tips is Officer Chuck Parisi of the Geneva Police Department.
The purpose of our crime prevention team is to partner with the community. Obviously, we're trying to prevent crime by the definition of it, and we feel that if we work closer with the people we serve, whether it's merchants or the residents, that we can address the problems that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the information that we provide in crime prevention may appear to be simplistic or basic in nature, but what happens in all of our day-to-day lives, myself included, is we get caught up in just getting things done, and sometimes the crime prevention issues don't really come to mind. So just simple reminders a lot of times is what we're here to provide. Sure. Geneva's crime statistics are similar to the surrounding area in the Tri-Cities. We see typically the same types of crime that you would expect in this area. The one crime that we do see consistently being of concern for us, because it's one that doesn't seem to reduce from one year to the next. It's one, and it's the one that's reported the most, is theft. And what is concerning about that is we believe that it's underreported, so that there are actually more thefts going on than what we actually are being able to document. In most of these cases, these are easily preventable. In many cases of theft, it's just unlocked motor vehicles, businesses or homes that weren't properly secured. And so a lot of times they're crimes of opportunity, and it's something that I think with crime prevention and partnering with our community, we can really get a better handle on. Crimes a lot of times will vary season by season. For example, in the summer we'll see a spike in car burglaries. This is often because it's a conjunction of children being out of school, and a lot of times, teenage kids that are home and bored, and they do this thing they call car hopping, where they go out at night and they'll pull on car doors and see which ones are open, and when they're open, they'll take change or whatever interests them in the vehicle. So that is a particular crime that does tend to occur more in the summer months, and it's warmer, so it's going to be something that they're out doing, as opposed to this time of year where it's bitterly cold. Not too many people want to walk around the neighborhood pulling on car doors. In the winter time, we always urge our residents to be aware of the fact that because there is snow on the ground many times, that is telling everyone if you're home or not. So if the driveway hasn't been plowed, and we do have some residents who will vacation or move out of Geneva for the winter months, it's important that someone's maintaining that property, at least plowing the driveway. When mail is accumulated outside, or when the driveway is covered in snow and there's no tire marks in it, and everyone knows it hasn't snowed for a week, that's a giveaway that there's nobody in that home. And then it can make itself a target for someone considering breaking into it. So we do see, depending on the season, certain things that will lend themselves to particular crime for that time of year. That's not to say that we don't have any vehicle burglaries in the winter. We have them all year long, but they tend to spike in the summer months. So those are just some of the things that we've noticed. Sure. As we all know, winter driving is pretty treacherous, whether it be the snow or the ice that we're dealing with. I know that in Geneva, later at night, when the temperature begins to drop again, some of the bridges we have in town, Randall Road and the Chrissy Road Bridge, they will freeze up, and that does tend to catch people off guard. So that would be the first thing to be aware of. Our bridges do get pretty slippery this time of year. The other thing I would recommend is good tires. If you're putting off having to buy new tires, which isn't exactly a fun thing to do, and it's expensive, this is a good time of year to make sure you've got good tires. They do make a difference with the traction in the snow. The other thing I recommend to people too is we all have cell phones now, and I think most of us probably don't forget to bring them with us. But it does happen on occasion. My recommendation is to take an old phone, doesn't have to have service anymore, along with a car charger, and leave it in your vehicle. And you can forget it's there, but if you find yourself stranded and for some reason either your phone is dead and you don't have a charger for it, or you forgot to bring it with you, there's always this backup phone that can still call 911. Because phones without service, as you know, they can still dial 911, and that way you can get help if you need it. This time of year, I also would urge people to make sure that they don't let the fuel tank run too low. And I try to keep at least half a tank in case something does happen where you get stranded. We've been fortunate for the last few years that the snow hasn't been too bad, but I remember in 2011, and there were vehicles stranded all over the place, including in Geneva. And it's important, should something like that happen again, that you're prepared. So I would also, this time of year, I'd keep some blankets in the trunk, along with kitty litter or sand to give you some traction if you do find yourself stuck, but not too badly. Jumper cables or one of those portable battery packs that start your vehicle for you. A lot of times this time of year, a car battery will go without warning. You might get to your destination, and once you're there and then you come back out to your vehicle, it just won't start. I would also suggest getting some of the reflective triangles that you can set up on the roadway in case you are stuck in a lane of traffic, to let motorists have better visibility of you. A lot of times when a vehicle's stuck, it's got no power, it has no electricity, and it's difficult to see, so those markers will help. They also help if you go off the road into a snowbank. People may not even know you're there. So if you can put those reflective devices or road flares out, people will know that you need assistance. The other recommendation I make to people, and we come across this often with vehicle accidents, is people are afraid to move the vehicle prior to the police arriving. I think part of the thought is they want us to see as much of what happened as possible, and I understand that. We are pretty good at figuring out what happened with the crash. We think it's far more important to get off the roadway. If you're not injured and your vehicle is drivable, get your vehicle off the roadway, because we don't want to see a second crash occur, which has happened. If you're not able to get your vehicle off of the road because it's not drivable or for some other reason, and you're not injured, we ask that, if feasible, you get yourself off the road. You leave your car there if you can't move it, and get off the roadway. So if there is that vehicle speeding up to your location and doesn't know that your car is in a crash or immobile, you're not getting into a second collision. So it's really just more for your safety. This comes back to sometimes the information we provide might seem basic or simplistic, but most of us, like I said earlier, we get so caught up in our day-to-day routine that these types of things aren't usually at the forefront, and so we tend not to think about them very often. My suggestion, and the biggest thing, easiest thing that we can all do to protect our home or our business is just simply locking the doors and windows. It's amazing how many people don't do that. A lot of times I hear that, well, why would I lock my door? I live in Geneva. Well, that's a wonderful sentiment, and I'm glad that we do have a good community, and we are a pretty safe community. However, burglaries sometimes do occur, and it's just better to be safe. There's a lot of other things that can be done as well. Motion sensor lights on the exterior of their house is a good deterrent. If someone walks up and the lights kick on, They don't, a burglar doesn't want to be seen. Interior lights that are on a timer makes it difficult for people to know if there's anyone home or not. More often than not, a burglar does not want to try to gain entrance to a residence if they think that someone's in there. And the same would be true for a business. So interior lights on timers are a good deterrent. Keeping basement window wells covered with, they do sell locking covers, is also a good idea. Basement window wells can be an easy way for someone to get into a home, so to put locking covers on those wells is good for your security as well as safety, as far as not having children fall into those. It also keeps some of the wildlife out, and we've had calls for that as well, raccoons or something being stuck in a window well. So it's a good solution for many different reasons. When you're going to be gone for an extended period of time, it's good to let some trusted neighbors know that. So if they see anything unusual, they can call the police. I would also consider, having your mail held so mail isn't piling up in the mailbox. Same with their newspaper, because nothing will tell people no one's home like newspapers in the driveway and a mailbox stuffed with mail that's coming out. So those are all things worth doing. The other thing that we can do if you're going to be gone for an extended period of time is utilize the police department's vacation house watch program, where you just go to the police department, to our records office, and just request that your home be placed on extra watch. And what that will do is you'll provide a lot of information that we'll ask for, and officers then every day will check on the residents. So if anything unusual is seen, we can check that out and let you know what's happening. Alarms are also a good deterrent if that's something that people are interested in doing. It does serve as a good deterrent. You can never make any residence or business burglar proof. You can just make it more difficult for them to get into. And when you do that, oftentimes they'll just say, what, this isn't worth the risk because there's too many obstacles in my way, and they move on. And that's really the best that you can do with it. That's a good question. It's important to report the thefts to us so that we know what's happening in our town. Without people reporting the crimes that are occurring, we're at a loss for understanding what is actually happening, for the citizens that we're serving. There's other good reasons for it as well, though. A lot of times, if the theft is substantial, you may need an insurance claim. More often than not, an insurance company is going to request that a police report be made. Oftentimes, when these thefts occur, the property is recovered at some point down the road, and without us knowing that theft occurred, we oftentimes will have no way to return that property to its owner. Thefts being reported also allow us to link similar crimes that are in the area. All of the police departments in this area communicate with each other fairly well, and when these thefts occur, that information is shared. And so if we see a similar theft occurring in St. Charles or Batavia, that's occurring in Geneva, we can link those things together, and oftentimes that can help us solve that crime. One other thing is that when the police are aware of a theft that's occurred, if it was a residential burglary or a business or some such thing, the police officers will do their best to address that and try to prevent it from happening again. And they usually do this through aggressive patrol of that area, and they will try to spend more time patrolling that area so that this is not a recurrent problem. Now, there's a number of different things that they can do, and I know a lot of our downtown merchants have done a lot of these things. We've had some meetings with them in the past, and they've always been very receptive to it. And a lot of them have made the changes that we had suggested. One of the things that we always ask for is that whenever possible, their point of sale be near the front of the business. This just makes it easier for them to control what's leaving the store, as opposed to that register being all the way in the back, and when they're assisting a customer, they may not know that someone in the front has just walked out with something. A lot of our downtown merchants have some pretty unique buildings that they work in, and some of those have a lot of different nooks and crannies. So we've suggested also the use of mirrors or cameras to prevent the blind spots that they have inside of their establishments. But by far the biggest thing that the merchants can do is provide good customer service. And you know, this is something that is good to do regardless, but when you have someone in your store who you feel may be up to no good, and you're asking them if there's anything you can help them with, it lets them know that they're being watched. And if they're a criminal, they may not like that, and they may take offense to that, and they may choose to leave. If they're not a criminal, they're going to appreciate the customer service. So it's always been something that it seems like a simple idea, really, but it is effective. And I think that you know, the merchants I've spoken with about this, they've agreed, and most of them tend to do that anyway, to provide that good customer service. So the other thing I would recommend for our downtown merchants is just obviously making sure that they secure their businesses, doors and windows at night. The high value items, you know, they shouldn't be in the window after closing hours for everyone to see. It just entices the burglar to break in for it. Cash shouldn't be left unsecured, with the idea that if there is to be a break-in, you want to minimize your loss. So those would be the primary recommendations that I would make for the downtown merchants. That's a good question. We have this come up a lot of times. And it's funny because people are reluctant to use 911 unless they think it's a real emergency. And the reason it's funny is because I find myself doing the same thing when I'm in my personal life. There have been times where I saw something, maybe a tree down or power lines down or something, and I was even reluctant to dial 911 myself, but I knew that that was silly. So I do find a little bit of humor in that, because you know, even though I'm a police officer, I'm really no different than anyone else when it comes to this. What I want people to know is that anytime they need to speak with an officer, whether they think it's an emergency or not, but if they feel that they need to speak with an officer, they need to call 911. What will happen is people will call the police department administrative number and say, for example, I've locked my keys in the car, it's not an emergency, but I need an officer to come help me. That call is going to be automatically transferred to the 911 dispatch center regardless, because anytime you need to have an officer come out to your location, it has to go through 911. That's how we get dispatched. Our police department doesn't send us on calls, our dispatch center does that. So really the simple answer is anytime you need to speak with an officer, you just call 911. A lot of times you may not think it's an emergency. Well, a lot of the calls we get technically aren't emergencies, and that's fine. If you have a legitimate reason for an officer to come to your location, 911 is fine. If you have a question about parking or a local ordinance or something more administrative, then you could call the police department, and you wouldn't need 911 for that. We now have 3 crime prevention officers on our crime prevention team, and one of the goals that we have set out for this year is to begin having quarterly meetings. We just had our first one recently, and we hope to continue doing this. The reason for this is because we want to continue what we think is a very good relationship that the police department has with the residents and the merchants here in Geneva. And we feel that sometimes the communication that police departments have with those that they serve could be a little bit better. We feel that oftentimes there may be questions that the people we serve have about crime prevention, or sometimes maybe not crime prevention related, but just maybe something procedural about how we do things. And I would love to have the opportunity to explain to people, what we're doing for crime prevention. And if they have a question about, for example, why is a police car going through an intersection with its lights on and then turns its lights off, why is that happening? That's a good question. And, I think that oftentimes police departments don't realize that people don't understand why we're doing what we do. And I want people to have the opportunity to be able to ask, and I explain those things. And in that example I just cited, it's very simple. We have many calls that are in between, where it's not a full-on lights and sirens type of call, but at the same time we don't want to sit at a red light for several minutes while something's happening that may get worse. It's not because we don't feel like waiting at the red light. So those are some of the goals that we have. We do want to continue the good working relationship we have with the community, and we also are looking into better ways to get information to our merchants for crime trends or other crime that we see occurring that may affect their business. For example, if there's a chain store that is suffering losses in another community from some group, we would like the opportunity to be able to go and let our stores in Geneva know, hey, this is what's happening in Chicago or wherever it might be, just so they're aware of it. So we would like to get better information flow. Well, our police department's located at 20 Police Plaza, and it's at the corner of South 1st Street and James, right across from City Hall. The entrance to it faces the east, however. Our phone number is 630-232-4736, and we have a website that is at www.geneva.il.us. When you go onto that, that'll take you to the city's webpage. You'll need to go to the City Government tab and then select Police. Then that will take you right into the police department's website.